Well, as a young man, I was one of the first organic farmers. And when it was all, it wasn't even called organic farming then, but it was just sort of beginning. And that's how I began to be known in a small way. And the BBC made a film of me, I think it was 45 or so years ago, a very sweet film, really. And a long one, 40 minutes or so, I think. And one of the people that comes here to meditate with me is a BBC producer. She works on the Witness program, and she thought it'd be a good idea to have an update of this film. So they dragged me over to my old farm, which I'm afraid has been sold now, and not as it was, but there we are, back on my old land, and they made another short little film there. This time only, although they were filming for the best part of a day, they cut it down to only 4 minutes, but that's how it is these days, isn't it? Just a glimpse, but it's again, a very sweet little film, and all this can be found on our YouTube channel. Well, we're in Bakewell, where I've lived since. Well, I haven't lived here, but my family home was here. Mum and Dad lived just across the road. That was our home for 50 years. But I've been all over the place. But my dad was an artist, and that picture behind me is of our garden just across the road there. A nice, very nice walled garden. And Jeanette, who's the host of this bed and breakfast, I've known her since we were young. When they first came to live here, we're old friends. Dad never had much time for the mystic side of his son. He used to talk of this mystic nonsense. He was an artist. He was a deeply sensitive man, but somehow he was rather suspicious of whatever, he thought I was, he tried to make me a businessman, but it didn't really work. He was very good, Dad. He supported me, but he was more of this world. And I think he always worried that I wouldn't make a living. He didn't want me to be a burden on others, and wanted me to earn my keep. Well, I did in a small way, but I've not been a great worldly success. But please God, I found some spiritual riches, which of course is my hope and my joy to pass on to others. That's really what I consider the real work. This is our 4th day together. I think particularly of Martin here on my left, who is a university teacher and has to deal with the stress factor that's so prevalent among young people today. How to deal with it. For 20 years I attended a school of meditation in London and was very thoroughly taught. And on one occasion I remember an instruction came from the head of the tradition from which meditation comes. Your job is to provide the rest. I think someone must have asked him the question, what are we here for? What's our work? What should we do? He replied, your job is to provide the rest. Now it may seem obvious, but like so much that is obvious, we don't easily see what's in front of our eyes. And so it's worth remembering that there are two aspects to creation: movement and rest. And normally what we call life consists of movement, action. What are you doing? What shall I do today? Well, we've been sitting together long enough to very easily recognize that this room here has, 10 bodies. At least one of us is speaking. But what is the room full of? What contains us?
Space.
All right, space. Or rest. We've talked of stillness, space, silence, presence. Well, we can add another word to that, can't we? Rest. Movement and rest. These two aspects of creation are always present. But we tend to go with the action, go with the movement, and forget the rest. Now then, in English, of course, the word rest has two meanings, doesn't it? Both rest in the sense of, but also rest in what's missing, the rest. Where's the rest of it? Which actually is very convenient in a way towards understanding this. Because as we've discovered, it's from this rest that it all proceeds, isn't it? It's from this original creative rest that creation spreads out. Just as we wake up refreshed after a night of rest, with fresh energy to start the day. So, how do we deal with stress? It's an anagram, isn't it, of stress, rest. Isn't it simple? Like all this teaching, spirituality is the simplest thing in the world. Your job is to provide the rest. Now there's something to go forth with. You're all going off later on today to your own homes, back home, back into the world. That's a legacy. This is what I was given to as my work. And dare I suggest that if you take anything away from your days with me, take this legacy in turn and pass it on to others as it's been given to you. Rest. Do you know, wherever you are, in the middle of a shopping mall, facing a crowd of unruly students, what a comfort. Your job is to provide the rest. And the best place to rest is with your feet on the ground and, believe it or not, your bottom on the chair. And let me, if I may sort of proceed a bit, remind you of one of the great sayings of Jesus. I think I can quote it more or less accurately. Come unto me, he said. Come unto me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And let me remind you that yoke is that which is used to join two oxen together, isn't it? So it is both a word for unity, for joining together, and also for working together. So that in this work we are not alone. We have this infallible help, infallible companion with us. Again, as he says, I am with you always. And where is he? Well, what is this rest we're talking about? And where is it? Isn't it right here? Can we ever not be with it? Your job is to provide the rest. Now let your hands work at your computer, or as I did with my farm, or as you do with your lessons, as we all do in our respective ways. But let the performance take place in at least some awareness of the presence of this rest. And then you're not alone, and the help is always available. And all we need to do is to just remember and reconnect, like holding an invisible hand that's always with you. And that's what meditation is. Meditation is total surrender into those loving arms. Come unto me, he says, and rest. Meditation provides that rest because it allows it to come in. See, meditation lets go all this me, I've got to do it on my own. It helps us let that go and just reach this state of openness to what is here, just as we are now. You see? Open up your heart and let the sun shine in. But I was very fortunate in that Dad called himself an artist openly, and Mother would never claim to be an artist, but she was in her way just as artistic. It's a funny thing, women's liberation movement, even that sounds old-fashioned now, because women have changed. The whole sort of status of women has changed so much in the last few years. It's hard to realize that when I was a little boy, very few women worked. And women, well, I mean, they did work. They didn't go out to work. But, a woman's place, this is what was, considered. A woman's place was her home. The man was the breadwinner, the man who went out to labour in the fields, and the woman kept the home and looked after the children. And Mother was, she was very sceptical about women's live. I remember when she started, she said, it's all a lot of nonsense. She said, the woman's job is to look after his housewife and mother. And she was proud of it. My golly, she never saw that as anything but the very most noble of, she would never have used the word, she was far too humble. But anybody that stepped inside her threshold stepped inside what I could almost call a sacred space. No nonsense. And that was Mother's doing. Every surface shone. It was full of light. She couldn't even fold a face cloth without it not being a work of art. Everything was. She loved it. She poured her heart into her family and her home, her cooking. She knitted all this woolly I'm wearing. She knitted this. Look at it. It's faultless. Every stitch is a work of art. How old is this? It must be 50 years old now. I've got a drawer full of woolies. I never had a bought woolly until, well, not so long ago. I still like to wear these old ones. Who wouldn't? I'll wear them till they drop. No, it grieves me really how so much of that art, the art of housekeeping, has been lost. Of course, machines have taken it all away. The whole art of washing clothes. And I say, use the word art meaningfully. These things are an art. Sewing and mending clothes and knitting. All our children's clothes, Mother made them by hand. She never bought anything. This was during the war, of course, and Mother was brought up through the Russian Revolution. She knew all about starvation. Bought clothes didn't exist then. You made your own. That's how she was brought up. So these things, it's strange, it's all been, like so much, it's all been swept away, like handwork on farms, which also was all artistry. And Dad taught me, the basic art of working with my hands, of how to clean my tools. Unthinkable not to put the tools away cleaned and oiled after use. Now I see people dig their gardens and don't clean their forks and spades, and they all get rusty, and of course it's hard work, isn't it? There was artistry in everything. The way horses were kept, well, most horses, thank God, are still well kept, but yes, all that hand work. When you work by hand, the crudest person, if you don't give attention to your work, you just do it all wrong, don't you? So anyone that wants to achieve anything, even if it's just chiseling a bit of wood, has to give attention. When you give attention, you're automatically brought into the present. And all craftsmanship requires being present. So in a way, it's all meditation. And it's one of the features of life today, and one of the causes of stress, of course, that this is lost. This simple factor of grounding yourself in the present moment, and thereby creating work, doing work, is now sort of taken away by machines. And of course, the more automatic the work is, the less the man has to give attention to it, and so his mind goes off here, there, and everywhere, and gets crazy. Stress, because you miss the rest. You lose the common sense. And actually, Mother, even more than Father, you ask if she was a spiritual teacher. I say yes, even though she would never ever have used the word spirit, just by her presence, because she was present without even thinking about it, without even using these clever words. It was just natural, and it is natural, isn't it? Just as every dog is present, every sheep and cow in the field is present. You don't have to go to some clever retreat to learn how to be present. Just go and look at the cows, or birds, or anything. Anything other than another man. The one person that'll muddle you up is another person. Do you know, there's an old saying among sheep farmers, of course, which I was one. I kept sheep for 25 years. That the worst enemy of a sheep is another sheep. Because, of course, sheep get parasites. If you get too many sheep on a bit of land, the land gets Well, it's beautiful. It is. The land gets too much because of course, they dung on the land and that. Like us, we don't want to feed around other people's excrement, do you? Same with animals. So, just as the worst enemy of a sheep is another sheep, what's the worst enemy of a man? Well, I won't even say it, eh? I'll get somebody will shoot me down. Well, not always, of course. There's nothing better than a good man, but nothing worse than a bad one. I'm afraid all too often, human company gets into the realm of talk, and once you start talking, you can bet your boots you're no longer present. So beware of talking, my friends. That's something else to take away from here. Where does rest end and love begin? What's looking at you now? You look at any dog in the street. Look at a tree. Look at the sky. 2nd of May today. Summer's coming in. A very good analogy of God, is the sun. The sun just shines, doesn't it? Love just pours and pours. And the good and the bad alike. Yes, I was blessed in that way, but well, we all start off from different points and find what we're looking for in different ways. Funny, although having sort of just been so effusive in the praise of my childhood home, at that time it was also the fashion to send little boys like me away to boarding school. And at the age of 7, I was sent to a boarding school, which of course was very different, a very, what seemed to me at the time hostile, rather savage little world of other little boys where there were no women, and all that motherly love wasn't present at all. The idea was that too much mother's love made little boys soft. And that to make us tough and stand on our own feet, it was good to be taken away and toughened up in a boys' school. Well, maybe it served me well, maybe not. Who knows? A bit of everything, I suppose. But that was my experience. And perhaps from that, as I grew up, the great cry of my life was for love, to love and be loved. And perhaps because the first 18 years of my life, apart from my mother, I hardly knew what a woman was, because I went on into another boarding school when I was, after my first, until I was 18. Then I had the army, again very much a man's world. So I was really 20 before I had much to do with women, apart from the rather, you can imagine how women are regarded in the army. It's all rather very sort of mannish and rough. Yes, I repeat, the great cry of my life was to love and be loved, and through many experiences of hopelessly falling in love with women that were either unobtainable or didn't return it, I've never been that successful really in finding love. I've always felt, in a way, unfulfilled in that direction. I suppose that's why I loved my farming so much, because what I didn't find in women, I did find some outlet in farming. Strangely enough, it wasn't until I went to Russia where I found myself among Russian people. In that particular Russian atmosphere, suddenly I realized, I began to understand why all this was. Of course, I was born of a Russian mother, and Russia's not the same as England. It's got quite a different emotional content there. So I suddenly felt myself at home there and lost that loneliness, that emotional loneliness. But, sorry, that's a bit of a diversion. Where I've really found fulfillment in love is in spirit. And I came to realize that all that I didn't find, all the deficiencies of this life, are actually lessons that lead us on to ultimate fulfillment in spirit. And just imagine what that means at the end of life, because now life, which seems really very brief, really just quite a sort of an education, really, a schooling, a 70-year, 80-year schooling, whereas in front of me stretches infinity. And I'm all too happy, really, to say bye-bye to this long learning process of struggling through mortal life now, to enter into the total fulfillment of spirit, which is all the love you've ever dreamed of, and never ever says no. I know it's hard to believe when you're young, because we're all so strongly, dominated by hormones, and we want physicality, of course. But in time that does die out. It's only a temporary thing. And in the real breadth of human life, it's really quite a small period. So whatever our adventures of love are or are not in this world, don't lose hope, my dears. Because ultimately that voice which says, "Come unto me," that's the voice of love, isn't it? I am with you always. That's what this work is all about. Yes, for some people certainly it's other people have it more of a sort of learning process, an intellectual process. Well, but yes, that too eventually melts into love. Yes, I can really say now that all life's disappointments actually are teaching us that this world is a passing show. It comes to pass. See, even the most wonderful marriage, most wonderful love, should you be fortunate enough to find it, what happened? We died, didn't we? We continue after death in some way. Who knows? I can't tell you how. It's extraordinary. But I've often said on these videos, from being the most unhappy man in the world, homeless, jobless, loveless, and alone, I'm now one of the happiest, the most completely fulfilled, at home in the presence, with work to do, and never alone, even though I live alone with the invisible friend. Then that is really everyone's experience. It's certainly mine. So there's nothing to be surprised about. And this is where the little word discipline pulls you through. Now, when I was taught to meditate a long time ago, I was told to meditate for a quarter of an hour, night and morning. And this was emphasized throughout the 20 years or so that I attended the School of Meditation, the discipline of daily practice. Because the thing about discipline is that constantly throughout life, you see, we start off, you're all going to go away this afternoon full of good intentions, aren't you? And after a day or two, just like a grass growing up, first of all, grows up towards the sun, yippee, I'm going to, and then what happens, you see? And the same thing will happen to you. You'll get pulled down, you'll get diverted, won't remember what I say, you'll get muddled up. Other people will say, don't expect this is just nature. Now the thing about discipline, like cleaning your teeth, even if you don't want to do it, oh hell, I've done this so many times before, nothing happens, waste of time. Just sit down and do your practice every day. Do your meditation. And it's most important, more important to do it when you don't want to do it than when you do. Just sit down, plod away, keep repeating your mantra, whatever it is you do, and just do it for the prescribed amount of time. That's what's pulled me through, Glenn. Nothing else. It's not my own strength or anything. I've got no strength. It's just discipline. And after, it may be quite a number of years, you'll find that it becomes the most important thing in your life, but it may take many years for that to happen. Self-will is very powerful because we believe in it. And you can't just, I'm going to do without it. It's not so easy. So be diligent, my dears, in your practice. I started to meditate. I had a farm here in Bakewell, which is, I don't know how many miles from a long way, isn't it? Well, some hours' journey from London. And I was a young farmer then, of 26, and I had a flock of sheep, over 100 sheep. And I started to meditate in March, and they start lambing in April, and I had to go down to London. Can you imagine that, for a shepherd to leave his flock? What it cost me, emotionally, to leave my beloved sheep and go down to, as an arrogant young man there, I thought London was the last place on earth. Who on earth wanted to leave the green fields of home and go down into that bedlam? And anyway, that's what it cost me, to say nothing of the money, because I had to go by train, and I had very little money in those days. And then I'd get the late night train back, so that I was there at dawn next morning on the farm. And then after lambing was over, come haymaking time. Just imagine what it is to leave a hayfield on a sunny afternoon and go down to London, for God's sake. And risk rain coming, spoiling the hay. God knows how I did it. And then later on with my second farm, when I was growing vegetables, well, it was before really I started growing vegetables, and I was going by train then, and I only had a small farm. I didn't think of growing vegetables, and I had to go down to London, and I had a surplus of lettuces, so I took them down with me and just left them for friends in the school. And they knew I was a farmer. They knew the way I thought and were interested in it, because most of them were just townie. They didn't know anything about the land. And at the end of the school evening, the box was empty and there was a saucer full of money. And I suddenly thought, well, good heavens, I can grow organic vegetables. That's how I started growing organic vegetables and became well known as one of the first organic farmers. But, oh God, those trips to London, they screwed me up for years and years and years. But the funny thing is that looking back now, I'm grateful for them because, you see, they made me strong and determined. And I remember another thing that school taught me, that the only, if not, anyway, the main requirement of anyone starting on the spiritual path is determination. I suppose that's what you might call courage, Glenn. You've got to be determined, because there'll be endless things thrown in the way. Financial, you've all had to pay a lot of money to come up here, I know you have. And it'll cost you everything. And remember, there's nothing in this work for me. Discipline and determination. It'll pull you through. Pulled me through.